Hi everyone, Vanessa here, alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017. Today I'm going to be talking about absolute unselfishness. This is a continuation of a series of videos that I'm doing on the Oxford groups for absolutes. And these four absolutes were created in order to give us a pathway, some guideposts to make sure that we were living a life of spiritual growth and spiritual alignments with our higher power, with God. And this was to keep us spiritually aligned. The 12 steps of AA, they yoinked those four principles, chopped them up into the 12 steps that keep millions of addicts and alcoholics sober over the last, I don't know, oh gosh, almost 30 years. I'm sorry, almost 100 years. When was that written? Like 1934 or something, 1930, I don't know. So yeah, this is what we're talking about. So the four absolutes from which the 12 steps were derived, and we are talking about the third one. We've already covered absolute purity and absolute honesty. And next time we'll cover absolute love. And again, these are supposed to be benchmarkers or basically our directional guides, northeast, southwest, about how we navigate our lives and making sure that we're in alignment on these four pillars, basically. So, unselfishness, we're going to jump right in. Unselfishness is the cornerstone of sobriety. In sobriety, we would call this being of service, right? And with the four absolutes, the Oxford group, they really, you have to remember this was a Christian group, right? So they really derived unselfishness as the crux of being Christ-like, right? Because clearly the man died for our sins, right? That is the Bible. And that is, I was gonna say like the grand finale. That is so disrespectful. But that was the epitome of what God did, right? What Jesus did for his followers and for even those who don't follow him was to sacrifice his life. And that is the ultimate way to signify unselfishness. But you're probably not being asked on a day-to-day basis to sacrifice your life for somebody else's sins. You're probably just being, if you're like me, inconvenienced and annoyed by somebody asking you to spend 5 minutes reviewing something. So this idea of the Oxford group being like, to be unselfish, we have to, this is how we're going to get Christ-like, and then me looking at the ways that I'm being asked to be unselfish and then comparing that to Jesus and being like, okay, I'm kind of, I don't know that I'm ever gonna rise to that occasion. But the reality is that we're all faced with our own forms of where we cling in our lives, what we feel really matters to us, what we make our foundation to be our security that we stabilize ourselves on. And whenever somebody requests or needs something of us that inconveniences us or destabilizes that foundation, like we tend to cling harder and then hurt the people who are coming to us for help. And so in that way, I think we really need to reorient ourselves in what unselfishness actually means, because we're not unselfish as a way to punish ourselves, right? We're not like, I know that this will be an inconvenience for me, or that I'm going to be sacrificing something. So now I'm doing something good because somebody else asked me to. If you come at unselfishness from that tone, you will inevitably end up in resentment, which is not where we want to go. Unselfishness is not codependency. It is not being walked all over. It is not anything like that. Unselfishness comes from what we talked about last week, which was this pure place of heart and a true willingness and desire to help others because you see the God in them, God's divine image in them. And because of that, you want to be a devoted neighbor, a devoted partner, a devoted friend, father, child, mother, sister, cousin. We can all be this, and even to strangers. Strangers, I just colloquially call neighbors. Anybody is a neighbor, everybody always. And I hope that we begin to see people more in this way because I feel like, especially in such a politicized country, we've really gotten used to creating an us versus them narrative which is not, and we find it so disturbing and so like rage inducing because we weren't created to experience other people in that way. And we think that we become agitated because people are not believing in the same things that we're believing in. But we're actually becoming frustrated because we're sensing a separation from other people. And we are clinging to our beliefs in this way that makes us selfish and unhelpful to others. And this is also a way that when we are practicing unselfishness, that we can really counteract the very natural behaviors and attitudes of pride and greed and ego. Everybody has these in them, and there isn't a shame in acknowledging that they exist within us, but there should be some type of emphasis on the willingness to grow beyond that, right? Because pride can pop up anywhere and everywhere. And just when we've overcome our hurdle of pride in like whatever it can be, like maybe it's money or relationships or the job title that you have or the car that you own or whatever, just when we overcome a sense of pride or even our religion, even our spirituality, we can start to develop an ego and a pride around that. And when we begin to do that, we're not really helpful to others, actually. And they keep us from having a transformative spiritual experience. So, this is why overall we want to practice unselfishness, because this is the antidote to those things, which again are very normal human behaviors. But the sooner that we can look at it straight in the face and be like, oh, wait, that's my pride, that's my ego, that's my greed getting in the way, the sooner that we can correct it and come at it from a place of unselfishness. And the spiritual significance of this, and again, getting back to Jesus here, is he really did model unselfishness for us. If you ever read the Bible, I mean, there are just stories upon stories of Jesus walking through crowds and like people just like clinging to him and wanting his attention. And it's not like you ever see or hear Jesus going, get away from me. I don't have time for you. Look at the sundial. I'm late or whatever. Like this was not a thing for Jesus. And it was like he'll stop and he'll like, yes, tell me. And he spent time with people. There was no inconvenience for him. And again, if you're not Christian, that's fine. You can just look at what I'm referring to when I speak about Jesus as a story. We know the story of Jesus, we know the story of the Bible, because even literature has, if you come at it from a literature viewpoint, then there's still something artistic in there, right? There's something poetic in there. There's something full of wisdom in there that we can still derive from the Bible as a literary piece that can change us, that can transform us and we can still have a spiritual experience in this way. I'm not asking y'all to convert to Christianity, all right? I'm a bad evangelist. I know this, and I've talked to Jesus about it, and I just don't know what to do about it. But yeah, this is an example of it. And this is specifically, let me see, I had this beautiful Philippians 2, 3 through 8. I wanted to read this. I'm not much of a Bible quoter typically, but this is extremely relevant. So I do want to read it. So that's Philippians 2, 3 through 8. And let me look up the translation that I liked. They all have the same. Yes, I like the ESV. You'll get the same. I like meditated on this one. So the ESV, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So it is just, we don't want to be chasing selfish ambition or conceit. Okay, we cannot be so self-centered and self-focused. We rather need to be humbled to this point of wanting to serve others around us and consider other people more significant than ourselves. And well, that's another tangent. and not only to look at our own interests, but look at the interest of others. We must always be holding space for how what I want, what I think is the best thing in any situation, how my opinions, how my beliefs, how they clearly would benefit me at some point. But does everybody benefit from this? Is this does my neighbor being negatively impacted by something that I'm very stuck to and clinging to? And it's like, who didn't do that was Jesus. Jesus was straight up a child of God, right? And told people as much by referring to God as Father. And still was not throwing on a robe on a crown and riding around on fanciest little carriages or whatever. He was just like, actually, I have this power and I'm here to serve others with it. And that is exactly how we should be doing this. That is exactly how we should be living our lives. And if it sounds uncomfortable, if you start to find yourself being like, I'll do this, I'll feed the homeless, but I won't be unselfish here. Or yes, but I won't do it here. Or you start putting limitations on your unselfishness, that is a really good thing to sit down and journal about. And again, coming back to this, it's like, not only do we need to come and experience the world through this perception, but we need to have faith that others will also come to experience the world in this way. Because if we were all genuine, and I'm not talking about a utopia here, I'm not talking about some perfect world, but if the majority of the people on this planet were able to shift the perception of life to be more us oriented and less me oriented, it would completely change the dynamics of power in this world. And suddenly, if I'm watching out for my neighbor's best interest and I know that they're looking out for my best interests, the interests that are being shoved down our throats by consumerism or capitalism or politicized agendas will not have power over us anymore. And we will not find that inner agitation that's telling us that we do not like being separated from our neighbor, even though we cannot consciously call it that most of the time. So I really liked that. And again, this is, and if you are not Christian, if you have a different higher power, what would your higher power do? I have never met someone with a different higher power who was like, oh yeah, they're really selfish though. No, they're gonna fight for that, or they're gonna be really like manhandling situations just so that they make sure that I get the raise or whatever. It's like that just sounds like a pretty unspiritual, not loving higher power, right? That does not actually sound like somebody that I would trust or put my sobriety in. And so, just something to consider. You don't need to be Christian to follow along with that thought process. But I hope that in examining your higher power and what you cling to and rely on, that is being modeled in your higher power, that type of unselfishness and willingness to help the group, the group at large, and not just one person or one specific group. And this is modeled throughout, specifically like Christian, actually any mystic. There are a lot of mystics who monks or who were nuns and who lived in poverty. And that's not for everybody. I'm not telling you to give up all your belongings and whatever, move to the mountains or something. Some people are called to do that and some are not. The important thing is that they embraced a radical generosity with time and resources and a general detachment from materialism, because materialism does tend to emphasize a me perspective, right? A me navigation system. And that doesn't really work. It's really short-sighted. There's only so much me that I can do before I'm like, I'm at the end of me. What is the point of this? And again, I can understand that this sounds pretty scary because if I'm not watching out for me, then who is going to watch out for me? And this is essentially the root of addiction and fear a lot of the time because we feel uncared for. We feel not cared about. We feel not taken care of. And so we make sure that we're going to take care of ourselves. And we end up doing this by drinking and drugging ourselves to death and shaping an entire little life, an entire little, I don't know about you, but I have like rituals around my drinking, which I wouldn't have called it that at the time. But looking back on it, I absolutely would identify that as a ritual. I could get like butterflies walking into a CVS in the heat of summer and walking there, missing a freaking flip-flop and strolling the aisles to get my little boxes of wine in the air conditioning and being like, oh, this must be heaven. And just counting out, doling out my change that I got out of the car seats and just being giddy and so hopeful because I just purchased these two boxes of wine. And it's just, I had a whole ritual that was like, it just gave me like a sense of control, knowing that I was going to have freedom via a blackout. And it was like, okay. And all of that to say that there needs to be a level of surrender to this. And a lot of people don't like that word because it has a connotation of a loss of control. But it's like that. I think it was Gnarls Barkley, that song. It's, oh, that song Crazy or whatever. What is that? What is the lyrics? It's you really think you're in control or something. I don't know. And it's funny because again, it's like if I am so scared of, I see this with people with money, for example, people who are terrified of living in poverty or being perceived as poor because our culture does not think that the poor are holy for some reason. And they seem to think of poverty as a disease of self and self morals instead of a society based disease, because why would anybody let somebody starve on the streets? I struggle with this a lot, and not because I'm a saint by any means, but because I can very easily see myself as a person living on the streets. I've become very close to it. I have lived in my car and I've lived in motel rooms that I had to rent by the day because I couldn't secure enough money to rent them for a weekly rate. And so I also work in an industry where people be are are just one paycheck away from living on a street, especially in California, where it's really difficult to live. And people seem to think that it's they must have done something to get themselves in that situation. And it's even if they did, no healthy, sane person does that because they like it. So no, these people are choosing to be that way. And I've talked to people who've chosen to live on the streets, and there's a lot of trauma and hurt and darkness around that. Anyway, going back to unselfishness is if it can sound scary to say, if I'm sacrificing my own best interests and I'm not taking care and watching out for me, who's going to do it for me? And if I don't fight to make things exactly how I think that they need to be, then someone else is just going to come in and take advantage of me. And this is where having faith in your higher power is going to be really important, because where is your faith in that? We've all heard, especially if you've read the big book, faith without works is dead. Sometimes the works is just a surrender. It's the letting go of your expected outcome. It is a letting go of trying to control the people, places, and things around you to get what you think you need to be getting. As I was saying, people who have this fear of poverty, and so they do everything to make sure that they get money. And it doesn't matter who they are stepping on, who they are taking advantage of, what more other morals they are burning down just to make sure that they're getting that paycheck, just to make sure that they're doing this. And they are so focused on the end goal of having a certain amount of money that they, and I'm not, and by the way, by they, I should be saying that we, because I've definitely done this in the past, is like that we prioritize that over, and I'll speak to myself specifically in this case, over picking up a call from my mother who's calling me in the dead of my busy work day. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, doesn't she know what I'm doing right now? I'm working. Like, I'm a single girly over here trying to pay all my bills. Like, she's not gonna be able to pay my bills. And now she wants to call me and ask how my day is going. And I had that experience the other day. I was like so annoyed. I was like, why are you calling me when I'm trying to work? And and then I like had to, I heard, I had some friends who lost their mothers, and one of the things that they said was, no one will ever love you the way that your mom loves you. And that just, I heard that voice so clear in my head. And I was like, okay, let me answer. And my mom is my mom. There's nobody in this world who's ever going to love me, even a droplet of the way that she loves me. And that is a gift. I haven't even had the healthiest relationship with my mother throughout my entire life. But I'm going to say that I can never say that I've never felt loved by her. I wish that she'd love me differently at times, but that is something that I know to be true. And what a gift that I have that from her and with her, because clearly I love her as well. And yeah, I can take 5 minutes out of my busy work day and talk to my mom about how her day is going. And what is the fear there? If I step away from my work, everything's just going to crumble and we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's okay, let's like right size my ego a little bit. Like the world's absolutely never going to fall apart because of anything that I'm doing or not doing. So really being able to see myself and humble myself to be like, actually, the thing that really matters to me is connection and relationships. And my mother is a part of that. So I need to prioritize that perhaps. And so it is letting go of control and it is trusting in God. And I still do struggle with this primarily a lot with work because I can be like that same thing. Just if I don't take care of it, who's going to take care of it? And it's like, I don't know, take care of it tomorrow. The world's not going to fall apart. It really is not. And there can be that is an exercise of faith, right? I know in the past too, when if there have been jobs that I really wanted, or if there were relationships that I really thought that I wanted to be in, I would just be like, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that this happens? I need to, and then I'm like overperforming and over functioning to make sure that this thing happens. And I'm burning myself out first and foremost. One, I don't even know if that's in God's will for me. I don't know if that's on God's radar for me. Maybe it is so difficult because God doesn't want me to be doing it. And or if I just can just surrender and like really let go and really believe and trust that if something is in alignment for me, it can happen. It will happen. And if I am connected enough to my higher power to get the clear direction that I need to help make it happen, then I can do that. But it will rarely come from a place of agitation or feel or selfishness. It's usually the opposite. It's usually I have to give up something, whether it's my beliefs, whether it's my time, whether it's my money, whether it's the parking spot that I wanted, whether it's the neighborhood I wanted to live in, or it's shoot, I don't know, whatever it is. All these things that I've needed to give up in order to really get into alignment with what is meant for me, actually. And so really trusting in that. And so that's a scary thought. And it takes a lot of practice. And I would encourage you that if there's something that is stressing you out right now, to really just consider surrendering the outcome of that at all. And if that's scary, then I will up the ante here and ask you to imagine what life would be like if that thing that you really want, it just doesn't happen. You just can't pull it off. Maybe it just wasn't for you. And there have been times in my life when I thought that the entire world would end if something that I needed to have happen at that moment didn't happen. And guess what? That thing would not happen, and something way better came along. Something that if when I look back at those situations, I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I was fighting for that when I had this instead. So it's something to think about. That requires a lot of faith. And sometimes not even that much. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of faith. So that's something to consider. But again, the unselfishness here. And then also with sobriety, like how it relates is, again, addiction is deeply selfish. We not only just harm other people, but we harm them by being so consumed with what our personal desires are and our personal wants are for ourselves that other people are just like hurt by it. And if we can just step back from that, I always ask my sponsees when I work with them, when I can really see them like losing sleep over a situation that they have no control over anyway. And I can't even like fake encourage them if something's going to go well for them. Because sometimes I'm like, but you can't really be like, maybe it's just not meant for you, because I see them like wrestling with something to make something happen. And I just really have to remind them, zoom out of your life for a second. Right now, you are so hyper focused on this one thing that you can't even look outside of that one situation to see who else is being impacted by this, and zoom out even further and further. And is it possible that in zooming out, there are like a dozen other possibilities of how this can work out that would actually be better? And the reality is, yes, and some possibilities we can't even imagine, and they can be so much better. And so that is really important when we're finding ourselves really stuck on a certain situation of like how we want to make it happen and what can we do instead. Sometimes just giving that up is the most unselfish thing that we can do. Sometimes even placing expectations on other people. And if they don't act this way, then I'm just going to lose it, or I'm just going to da da da. I can't get that person to show me this, that, and that, then it's like, why are you spending so much energy on that? Just let it go. And that could be the most kind thing that you can do for that person. Maybe you don't get what you want out of that situation, but that person now doesn't feel like a burden, at least. Now that person isn't being constantly nitpicked and told that they aren't good enough. And what an act of love that is. And all you did was stop nagging somebody. And by the way, I'm speaking to myself very much here. Another thing is that I've been talking about surrendering our own selfishness, but then there is, and it was just a more passive way, although it can feel pretty aggressive, but it's more of a passive way to be unselfish, right? To let go of our expectations and our own desires. But then there is a more active approach of unselfishness, which is actively being of service to others, right? So in the 12 steps, for example, I remind my sponsees that I'm taking them through the step work so that they know how to do the step work and they have an experience that they can then share and be in recovery with and show others how to also get free of their addictions. Doing the steps is not recovery. Taking other people through the steps is recovery. And so I always preface my sponsee relationships with that because I want them to know the expectation for them to stay sober and stay aligned with God and be fulfilling their purpose is to be helping other women also be sober and be not just sober, but in recovery and spiritually growing. And so it involves service. And hey, step work is not an easy thing to commit to doing. And it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours a week for me that I'm setting aside in my schedule. And it's a commitment that I make with my sponsees. And we sit there and we read and we talk through it. And I share my experiences, they share their experiences. And it can be, I guess it can be perceived as inconvenient. I know I've had people ask me before, do you charge people for this? And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Because I'm also like actually getting something back from this. And clearly that is like the underlying, we can start arguing about if there's any such thing as pure unselfishness, because I am still getting something out of the sponsoring aspect of this. But in the grander scheme of things, I'm not actually getting anything from this besides a beautiful exchange of spiritual experience that I get to witness in somebody. And that helps to maintain my recovery, right? And my spiritual health. And then there is the actual act of actually, I think that parents can be really good models of this and how much they sacrifice for their children, right? And it's all the time and the sleep, and then the women basically sacrificing their bodies to bring life into this earth. And it's like you're sacrificing so much of yourself for this very seemingly selfish little creature that you have given birth to that is not giving you anything but actual complete love. And what an act of service that can be. But it is even a greater act of service when you can go outside of your little sphere of influence and help people without expecting anything back, and just really being able to see how your kindness and your purity, love, unselfishness, and honesty can help other people. So that is kind of how it can impact your sobriety. So practically speaking, how can you begin to show up unselfishly? And it really is by putting aside our own self-interests. And asking yourself the question, like I have to ask myself the question at least 3,000 times a day when I'm getting agitated about something. Am I acting for my own benefit or am I acting for the benefit of the greater good? Because God is in the greater good. God is in me too. And I have the power to contribute to the greater good and have a positive impact on the greater good if I am considering the greater good, right? And the greater good means, again, my neighbors. And I'm not talking about just my residential neighbors, but I'm talking about the stranger down the street whose name I don't even know, or the person across the country who I don't even know, or the person across the world who I will never meet. But I have to understand that my actions have some type of repercussion. They ripple out, right? And they do impact other people. And that is a responsibility that I need to be thoughtful about without being hung up and obsessive about, because there is a lot of grace and mercy that we are also provided from God, our higher power. And so that's something worth considering. In general, we should really be thinking about that and really zooming out. And is this the thing that I'm fighting so much for? Because I think that I'm just going to like implode if I don't get it. Is it so important that it is changing the world for the better? Or is this just something that only I will benefit from? And there are very clear ways that we can help other people, which is through volunteering or mentoring or donating. These are very just like practical ways that we can do this, or it can be in more subtle ways. And I was thinking about this in a relationship recently where, and it was alluding to this earlier, where I was just like, this person is just not giving me what I want. And even though when I take it to prayer and meditation, I can see all of the best intentions in this person, and I'm just like, yes, but I just don't think that I think that they are maxed out. I think that there is no real current capacity to provide what I emotionally and spiritually need in a partnership, right? And so what I was doing was making myself crazy by pouring and pouring into somebody who was unable to reciprocate what I was pouring. And that is a very selfish give and take, right? And then setting this expectation on them. And I don't know if they felt bad about it, if they were conscious about it, but I had the the potential to be harmful towards this person or making them feel less than or making them feel like they're not good enough is there, right? Because it's like, why aren't you acting a certain way, the way that I need you to act? And then being like, I'm trying my best, I don't know what else to do. That has a potential to be harmful. And the reality is that the kind thing would be to just step away and say, I'm just not going to get what I think I need from this situation. I don't know what I actually need, but I know that it's not this, right? And I'm not going to hold this person to a standard that they never agreed to be held to. And I'm also not going to punish them for not being able to meet my expectations. And all of that love and that affection that I had towards this person was not a waste of anyone's time either. I hope that they were able to receive it. I hope that they get to think about it and reminisce on it and enjoy that for what it was. And now, hopefully, in the future, they'll be able to reciprocate that with somebody else. It's maybe I didn't get the benefits of that unselfishness, but I hope that they can carry that on and maybe they've learned something so that they are able to provide that to somebody else. And that comes from a place of like, where before really taking it to God, I would see the situation and be like, oh, I just wasted my time, my energy on somebody who doesn't care about me, or start telling myself really negative stories about it. But if I really believe in God and I really do trust and have faith in God, that I have to see that this situation has changed me and purified me in my heart and my intentions and has shown me and taught me what I do want in relationship, right? And I hope that this person also learned what they do and don't want in relationship and that there is growth here for both of us. And I just need to be able to put aside and set aside what my expectations were and say, God bless, and let us be on our way. And I found a tremendous amount of freedom in that. And I feel like so often we put these expectations on others that can be really selfish and harmful. And in saying that as a basic professional in doing that. So being able to practice detachment, if I'm going to do all this good for you, I cannot be expecting that in return. That is not pure intention. Am I acting for my own benefit or for the greater good? This is also why I say in the big book, it talks about how alcoholics and addicts, we basically can weaponize kindness. We basically can even make something as pure as love and kindness and turn it into a manipulation tactic. So that's why I really need to check myself when I am being generous and when I am being kind and when I am pouring into others. I'm like, am I doing this with an expectation in mind that I'm going to get something out of this? Because that is not pure unselfishness. I need to be able to practice complete detachment in these cases, let go of any expected outcome. And you don't have to do grand gestures. You don't have to donate a house to somebody. You don't have to buy a car. You don't have to give up your entire year's salary to be helpful to others and unselfish. It really is as simple as picking up that phone call from your mom when she calls, just because she wants to hear your voice. She misses you. Or being really, maybe you're running late and it's, oh, you see somebody on the side of the street with a flat tire. Oh, okay, fine. You feel really called to go help them. All right, I'm gonna go help them. I'm already late anyway. Or donating, you see somebody struggling, maybe they're and their child or living on the street and you got $5 bills in your wallet and that's all you got. That's what's going to them and putting it in their pocket and knowing that God's got your back and you'll be taken care of anyway. It absolutely will begin to transform your life. And it doesn't have to be transformed externally. It can be the transformation that happens inside you when you give from a place of unselfishness. And I think that is truly the importance of unselfishness is that we cannot be giving and giving to others with the expectation of something in return. Like tithing is a really good example of this. It's preached in churches, it's had 10% of your income, and God will bless you and you'll multiply and all this. And by the way, God does. It has 100% done that for me and transformed my finances without fail. But I also didn't expect that to happen. I was giving out of obedience, really was I was like, okay, I keep being told to do this. And I do know that if I'm obedient, I feel better. I just feel better about my relationship with God when I'm obedient in this way. And so I began to tithe, and my life and my relationship with money turned around very quickly. And by the way, there have been times where I don't tithe. And my relationship with money at those times is very fraught with anxiety and with insecurity and with fear and selfishness. And a really good way to surrender is by tithing. And if you don't tithe, then donating to some organization that you know is important to you and making that commitment to do it regularly. So anyway, these are all ways, even just listening to your friend who needs to call and talk to somebody about a breakup, or giving time to a neighbor who's moving or something and they need help moving and they don't have anybody in town. Yeah, I can donate a Saturday to help you move some boxes down into the elevator or whatever. And sometimes it can just be as simple as sharing a kind word. And you see somebody who's really disappointed in themselves or who just can't see a way out of a situation, just really sitting with them and encouraging them and just being able to be there for somebody, even if it's making you late for something. I heard a really good quote the other day. I was reading this book about prayer, and it says, the greatest enemy to spiritual growth is hurry. Hurry is not of the devil, it is the devil. And it's, yeah, anytime that I've been a hurried person, I have been incredibly selfish. And this is also why, like, we've all heard Colossians where it goes, love is patient, love is kind. Why is it patient? Why is love patient? Because when we are being impatient, we are prioritizing and saying that my time is more valuable than yours. And so you need to conform and get on my timeline and make things happen according to my time, knowing that we're all on borrowed time here on earth. Like, how greedy of us to think that we own any time ever. And imposing that on other people. It's like, what the heck? So we really need to think about that. Like, love is patience. So hurry is the opposite of love. It is impatient. It is of the devil. It is the devil to be in a hurried state, which spoiler alert, our entire culture here in the United States is run on hurry, right? Maximize efficiency, maximize productivity, maximize this for the dollar. And we're not sitting down and really looking at if any of it is worth it because we're just so swept up in the hurry. So look at the areas in your life where you hurry and try to make an active decision not to. And if you can slow down enough to experience your life without hurry, can you see the people around you? Can you begin to interact with people around you? Can you stop and say hi to your neighbor at that time? Can you help the person here or let somebody in front of you when they're merging onto the freeway? These are just things to consider as really practical and small acts of kindness if we need to baby step here into some major surrender and sacrifice of our own self-will, right? Yeah, I hope that this was helpful to you. And I would love to hear about maybe one way that you want to practice unselfishness or just your general idea or thoughts. And are you feeling that anxiety or like that pit in your stomach where you're just like, surrender what? Unselfish? Give to others more than my own self-interest? You're not a bad person if you think those things. We are wired to try to protect ourselves and our own needs. So, what kind of freedom is on the other side of that if we stop prioritizing that? And again, this cannot come from a place of codependency. And I think that this is where I've struggled in the past. It's like giving, and then getting really pissed off when that other person doesn't act the way that I want them to act. So that would be codependency. That would be selfishness still, right? So anyway, I hope that this was helpful. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. My other videos probably won't be helpful to you either. But if it was helpful to you, please do go check out my other videos. And if you can, leave me a comment, like, and subscribe. It really does help. And I am praying over each of these videos that they get to whoever they need to get to, whoever needs to watch them. And I really appreciate your guys' comments. I read them and I do reply to every single one. Sometimes it's a little bit late, but I do reply to them because I do appreciate you guys even watching and listening and hopefully being open to the experience of any of what I'm talking about. Okay, that's all for now. I love you. Goodbye.